It's been a few weeks now, but I came in early one day and I sat down at the bench. It's going over the cases that were finished the day before. And I picked up this full arch that was finished. My ceramicist had done her work on it and I was looking at it. I picked it up and I held it up to the light and I admired it. I looked at each and every rotation in my hand and really contemplated. And it started me thinking that, these difficult cases still get me excited. They still force me to stay curious and look deeper and understand that this trade is still in demand for the difficult things. But the thing that got me was right next to that pan was many other pans of smaller, equally important restorations, but maybe not as exciting to look at. Many of them not really a showpiece in any way, just a routine single unit. All of these cases are the kind that, techs just start to be automatic on. But it still stopped me because here I was sitting there in early morning doing the things that I've done over and over and over through my career. Nobody was watching me. Nobody was going to grade how I looked at this restoration. The patient was never going to know my name. The dentist was going to seat that restoration, and the patient was going to look in the mirror and think about their own face and not about the hours that me and my staff have put into this restoration. And I sat there holding the ordinary case up to the light, and I thought, 43 years of this, and on this routine Tuesday, this case is going to still do the same thing to me. It just forced me to look at it a little deeper today. And that's really where I want to start today, because I'm about to say a few things that could sound heavy and I don't want you to hear them wrong. I need you to know before any of this that I'm happy. I've built a life in this trade and I am very fortunate for where I am at. I'm not standing at the end of something. So whatever comes next in this episode, you hear it from the guy who still lifts the case up, puts it to the light when nobody's around, and smiles. Welcome back to Margins Meaning. I'm John Wilson, and this is episode 20. And if you've been with me the last few episodes, you know I've been sitting in some pretty serious water. We talked about what you leave behind. We talked about the easy cases and how familiarity is maybe a bigger threat to your work than failure ever was. Last time we talked about the phone and how the most important instrument I've ever owned is quietly starting to disappear into the portal. And those things are true, and I stand behind all of it. But guys, I went back and listened to myself, and I heard something I didn't love. I heard a man starting to narrate a funeral. And that's not where I am at. This is not an honest to where I am or what I'm going to be about. So tonight is a turn. Tonight I'm talking about what the trade is losing. I'm talking about the part nobody warns you about. Not the part where the trade changes, the part where you have to decide what kind of man you're going to be while it changes. And I have to start with a confession, because if I don't, none of the rest of this is worth your time. So a few weeks back, I'm sitting in my comfortable chair, have my computer in my lap, and I'm scrolling social media. And my social media is Pretty boring to most because it's mostly teeth and maybe a few golf-related things, but teeth dominated this evening, and I sat there. And I came across somebody that I'm not going to tell you their name because it really doesn't matter who. And because the whole point of what I'm about to make falls apart if I just make it about this specific person. So let's just picture somebody, maybe somebody younger, maybe somebody with just a few years into this trade. Yeah, they're calling themselves a lab technician, they're confident, and they're selling a course. Telling a few thousand people who follow them exactly how all of this works. And I felt something move in my chest that I didn't like. I'm going to be honest with you because that's the only thing this show is good for, right? What moved in me was not the concern for the craft. It was not some noble worry about the standards. It was uglier than that. It was, who do you think you are? It was, I've been doing this since before you were born, and you're up there acting like you cracked the code in a weekend. This is what was actually in there, guys. Resentment. Plain and small and a little bit just mean. And here's the part that scared me. For a second, it felt good. It felt good to be right about somebody. It felt good to be the one who has earned it, looking down at the one who hasn't. Then I put that computer screen down and I sat with it for a second. I didn't like the man I just had been for those 30 seconds. Because here is what is really true, guys. I have to say it out loud or I'm just a guy complaining on this damn microphone. Some of these people on social today are good. Some of them are really good. The kid I was resenting probably did get good fast. And part of why that is the tools today let you do that. That's not cheating. That is the trade I always said I loved. The one that keeps changing. And some of my frustration, if I'm honest, is not about the standards at all. It is ego. It is a man who got used to being one of the ones in the room that had the answers. And now doesn't love a world where the room maybe got bigger and a lot louder. I don't want to be that guy on the porch, angry old man shaking his fist at the young people. That's silly. The guy who used to be somebody, right? Narrating how much better it was back then. And then in that moment, noticing that I could become him, wow, I felt horrible. And that's not a small thing. And that's the whole reason I sat down to record this particular episode. But here's the thing about resentment. I've had a few weeks to actually think about that night. And it was never about that kid at all. Because resentment is almost always wearing a costume. You see it on somebody and it looks like anger. It looks like contempt. Might look like the guy who thinks he's better than you. But underneath, most of the time, I think it's fear. Resentment is just fear that got dressed up so it wouldn't have to feel like fear. So I made myself ask that hard question. What the hell was I afraid of? And somehow it didn't take too long for me to come up with an answer. You see, I spent 43 years getting good at something. Not weekend good, not course good, the kind of good that only comes from doing it 10,000 times and being wrong enough of those times to finally understand the why. And the world out there is starting to make that thing, the thing I gave my life to, look like something you could somehow buy on a Tuesday and master by Friday. And the fear, that real one, the one the resentment was covering for is this. Am I still necessary? Not am I good? I know I'm good. This is the scarier one. In the trade that's coming, the one with AI and these milling centers offering ridiculous margins to stay in business. Is the depth I spent my entire life building still something that anybody needs? Or is it about to come that commodity that I've been talking about for years? The thing they can get cheaper, faster, from somebody that doesn't know what I know, and maybe doesn't need to know it. That is what this fear was actually in my chest that night. It wasn't about who do you think you are? It was more about, am I still necessary? And I think if you're honest, some of you have felt that exact same thing about your own life, your own work, and maybe dressed it up the same way I did. You see, it's a lot easier to be angry at the kid than to sit with the fear that the thing that you're best at in this life, the thing that you are proud of, might be getting cheaper every year. So that is the floor. That's the bottom of it. And you can't build anything until you're standing on the actual floor, instead of on the story you told yourself to keep from feeling it. So once I was standing on that floor, the question changed on me. And it's not the one I thought I'd been asking myself. For a couple of years now, I've been asking, what's happening to this trade? Where is it going? What does AI do to us? How are these milling centers affecting my bottom line? What are these courses and the portals and the lack of communications and depth of knowledge actually doing to our trade? And guys, that's a fine question, but it's not my question anymore. That was the spectator in me watching the trade from the sidelines. It's a question you ask about the thing that is happening to you, maybe while you watch it, rather than being proactive about it. Today, my question is smaller and it's harder. It is. Today, I ask myself one thing. What do I do with the time I have left in this? Because, guys, I'm not done. I want to be clear about that. I'm not winding down. I'm not waiting it out. I've got a lot of good years in front of me, and I don't want to spend them as a critic of my own trade. I don't want to spend them being right about other people. That's the cheapest thing in this world. Being right from the sidelines. It costs you nothing and builds nothing. The trade is changing, fine. It was always changing. The real question was never whether it's changing. The real question is what I'm going to build inside of it before I'm through. And the way I see it, there's a few different paths to the finish line. Not all of them are equal. They don't all have the same perks. You see, I could resent it. I could spend the next stretch of my career keeping score, watching the feeds, getting that little hit of being right while somebody else builds something. That road is open. It's even comfortable at times. And it ends with me being bitter and small and exactly the man I caught in the mirror 3 weeks ago. I can romanticize it. I can tell everybody how it used to be back when you waxed everything by hand and the relationships were real and nobody point and clicked their way to the future. And some of that is even true, but you can't build a future out of the thing you're busy mourning. Nostalgia is just resentment in a nicer coat. Or I can do the thing I've actually done my entire life. The thing that is the only reason any of you know my name. I can think differently. I can get curious again. I can take all of this change that scares me just a little. And instead of standing against it, I can ask what I'm supposed to make out of it. And that's the road I want. And I'll tell you plainly, I do not always pick it. Some nights I'm right back on that computer scrolling for that cheap little hit. But the picking is the work. You pick it on Tuesday, and then maybe you have to pick it again on Wednesday. Nobody picks it once. So here we are. And if you're waiting for me to tell you exactly what I'm going to build, well, I don't have that info yet. I'm searching, I'm thinking, I'm contemplating, and I'm making some plans. But here's the thing. I'm going to tell you what happened because maybe it's the closest thing to a map that I may have. A few years ago, a younger tech reached out to me. It wasn't somebody that I knew very well. It was from the internet. He had some information for me and was asking me questions about full arch dentistry. He was one of those techs that was very adept with the software, had a really keen understanding, but when the software fails, when the software doesn't produce as intended, even if you followed that work order from left to right in the most fastidious way, you can sometimes get hung up. So he called and he reached out to me. He knew that I was skilled with this particular piece of software. He knew very clearly that I had more experience than he had. And I admired that. He reached out when he needed help. Now, the old guys that may be listening to this, the ones who trained me, the ones who were in my past, well, I can tell you a lot of them would have just said, hey, this guy has to stay stuck until he figures it out himself. Because knowledge was leverage back then. You know what you know, and you will hold it close to the vest because what you knew was maybe like a moat around your business. You didn't have to hand the competition the answers, and most people just didn't. And immediately I did feel that old reflex, but I admired the fact that this stranger to me reached out. Part of me thought at the time, why in the world would I help this guy from across the town and give him the opportunity to take work out of my pocket? And then I remembered the people in my past that did just that. So I did what I always do, and I swallowed hard and thought about it for a second while he continued to talk. And then I told him on the phone. I walked him through the challenge. I shared the potential solution. I gave him the point and click answers that he was looking for. It was more than just the how, it had the why behind it, and the thing underneath the buttons is what I hold most dear. Because here's the thing, guys. You can give a person an answer, but if you don't give him the why you need to be able to do this, and only the how, you've taught them nothing. And guys, here's what I didn't expect. It didn't cost me a thing to be kind, right? He didn't take any of my clients away. But what happened instead is that case got made. That case got made by somebody other than me for a patient who was never going to know either of our names. And a tech who was either going to figure it out the slow way or quit. Maybe he gets to stay in the trade a little bit longer. Maybe stay a little bit curiouser. Maybe really empowers themselves to grow. And if I got that feeling off of a phone, well, I hadn't felt that for a while. And I liked it. So that's the thing I want to build more of. Not just a course, not a brand, not a number, just more of that. And guys, I'm not talking about changing the industry. I think the people who tell you they're going to change the industry usually have something to sell you. I mean something smaller and to me more honest. A handful of techs who maybe got better because I did not protect my turf. Maybe a few dentists who finally understood because I made the case for it, that the lab was never the part that you could download. Maybe a recording somewhere that a young tech finds at 2 a.m. Maybe the way I used to find the people who knew more than me back when I was the one that was stuck. A dent, guys. A dent you see, not a monument, just a dent. That's all my goal is. Because here's what I've come around to. That old reflex that many of us have. Protect the moat. Hold what you know close. I think the moat is the thing that is actually killing us. I think the only way through what is coming is to stop guarding what we know and start giving it away faster than the courses can sell a cheaper version of it. The depth does not become a commodity if we are the ones handing it down on purpose. And guys, I'm going to be straight with you because I'm not going to end this on a pep talk. I do not actually really know if it's too late for any of this to actually happen. There's a voice in the back of my head, and maybe you probably have your own version of it as well. Maybe it says something like, John, you are the guy on the back half of his career, somehow telling himself a nice story so he doesn't have to admit to the trade that somehow he's getting passed by. And maybe that dent never takes. Maybe nobody finds that recording at 2 a.m. Maybe I'm just going to be one of those old technicians making peace and dressing it up as some sort of mission. And I hear that voice, and I'm not going to pretend I don't. But here's what 43 years of this has taught me. Guys, you never get to feel sure first. I never once started a hard case feeling 100% sure. I never started this lab feeling sure. I sat in that rented garage with no clients and a whole lot of doubt. And somehow, it worked anyways. The doubt did not leave. I just stopped waiting for it to leave before I started. So no, I'm not sure. And I'm going to build it anyways because the only thing I'm truly sure of is which man I don't want to become. So once again, we reach the end of one of these little episodes with no clean ending in sight. And most of the time I don't, but the one thing that I can say that after every one of these episodes, it gives me a little food for thought. I get to contemplate. I get to reflect. And hopefully I get to grow a little bit. So today I have a choice. I've made that choice 3 weeks ago at the bench, holding that ordinary case up to the light. And a choice I'm going to have to make again tomorrow. And hopefully the day after that. It's continual, guys. Because I promise you this, I'm not going to spend my last chapter as a spectator. I'm not going to spend it keeping score on people who are mostly just doing what I always did, which is showing up in a trade that they love and really making amends when things change under their feet. And most importantly, I promise you this, I'm not going to fade into a version of me that complains. I'm going to build something. I don't entirely know what that is yet, but I think I'm supposed to figure it out by just making things. The same way I figured out everything else in this trade by doing it. Badly at first, until somehow it was right. I'm not done, guys. That's the whole episode. I'm super grateful and maybe a little uncomfortable, and I'm still not done. Protect your margins. Protect your meaning. Until next time, I say thank you for listening and take care.